The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the hosts and guests, and not necessarily those of the staff or management of Worldwide Digital Broadcasting Corporation.
Knowledge is power, and this is powerful stuff. Wellness Education Cannabis Advocates of Nevada present the We Can 702 Nevada Cannabis News Hour with the We Can radio team. For the next 60 minutes, we'll take an in-depth look at the cannabis reform revolution sweeping the nation. Now, let's fire up the news hour. Here is the We Can radio team.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Nevada Cannabis News Hour. I'm your host, Mike McAuliffe. In the studio with me, as usual, is my co-host and friend, Perry Heitzu. How are you doing today, Perry?
No complaints. Life is good. Thank you once again for having me. It's good to be here. Life is
good, yes. Well, for those of us still here, mostly it is. Getting into Nevada news here, we see that Nevada had a massive first month in retail marijuana sales in July. And we have a story here by Colton Lockhead at the Review-Journal, which begins that Nevada dispensaries raked in more than $27 million during the first month of recreational marijuana sales, generating more than $3.6 million in taxes, according to figures released Thursday by Nevada Department of Taxation. And how does that stack up to other states? Well, apparently, Colorado and Oregon each sold about $14 million of marijuana in their respective first month of sales, and Washington sold 3.8. So we're crushing it. Yeah, we're crushing it here, as you would expect in a big tourist destination.
No doubt, of course. I mean, these companies didn't build their facilities as big as they did to accommodate the very small number of medical patients. They were anticipating this large demand, and I'm glad to see that there's enough supply, because there was supply questions for the first few weeks and things like that. Rumors were swirling that there was not enough cannabis to go around, and it seems like the producers and the cultivators have more than stepped up to the plate to provide the necessary medicine, or not. I'm sorry, I'm still calling it medicine. The flowers and the products. Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's interesting to see how that initial surge and fear of no product would be available. That's tied in with the licensing of the distributors and all. But I don't know that it's a case of these MME owners stepping up to it. They were gearing up for that big pot sales from at least from Election Day. Really.
No doubt about it.
And they've been saving up their extra buds for those days. But they did have a huge month. Apparently, 974,000 of the money came from a 15% wholesale tax that was levied on both medical and recreational marijuana when it's transferred between the grower and seller. So that's the excise tax. So that's in addition to the $3.6 million in taxes. And then this was significantly more than the $548,000 that the state had projected. So it's almost double that number. So the state is absolutely raking in this money, and you can see that Governor Sandoval and the upper administration, who I think in years past have been dragging their heels, are all of a sudden saying, "Oh, this money's for real."
Unfortunately for the governor, the money has already been allocated. Like his budget already includes a lot of these projected numbers, so it's almost necessary for them to get behind it in order to fill, in order for them to, how do I put this? He wants this to succeed as much as anyone else, because he doesn't want to come up short with his budgetary numbers, regardless of the fact that he's not up for re-election anymore.
Absolutely.
So, he doesn't want to look like a damn fool. And regardless of that,
he's not up for re-election, he can still be running for senator or some other office.
I suppose. Oh, yeah, he still has that option. I mean, there's nothing stopping him from doing that. I'm curious to see, how do I put this? Will the numbers for these marijuana taxes continue to go up as the year goes on, or will it follow the traditional model of Las Vegas revenue, whereas this is kind of our slow season right now, right? We do have a couple of big conventions coming in, SEMA, CES, etc. But traditionally, December is our worst month, and I'm curious to see how those numbers, you know what I mean? Are we going to see like a steady increase like we did with some of the other states like Oregon and Washington and Colorado, or are we going to see our cities economic roller coaster take effect on this tax revenue, especially with the recent turmoil that we've seen, concerning the event that happened last weekend. I have friends and family who work at the Mandalay Bay and the Lux store, and they say it's a ghost town down there. So, we'll see how that affects these projections.
Well, it's also a question there of how much of the market is out-of-state money and how much of it is local money.
Oh, it's. We already damn well know. Even with the medical, a lot of these places were having over 50% of the revenue was attributed to out-of-state patients. So when it comes to recreational, I would assume that the numbers are possibly even more skewed.
Well, as the recreational sales got underway in July, it certainly seemed that most of the people standing in line were local people, as opposed to tourists coming in, and so we'll have to see how that stocks up. As far as what you were saying a little earlier about the scare about running out of product, I think that's belied by the fact of how quickly the prices in the rec market have come down. And if there were really such a scarcity of product, I think you would have seen most of the retail sales saying up in that $400 an ounce range or plus. But the fact that you can go into dispensaries and buy easy ounces or this or that for $100 or $150 means that they have a lot of pot out there that they're trying to move.
Yeah, fair enough. Competition is fierce, so we'll end up seeing how this plays out. Hopefully best for the consumer, and the companies are still able to make their profit. And
competition is fierce not only in the dispensary arena itself, but as we mentioned a little earlier, in getting the product to the dispensary.
Right.
And we have another story by Colton Lockhead that says Nevada weed transport legal battle hinges on timing, Justice says. And the article starts out saying, to Nevada Supreme Court Justice James Hardesty, the legal battle over who can transport weed hinges largely on timing. In oral arguments Tuesday before the High Court, representatives from the Nevada Department of Taxation and Independent Alcohol Distributors of Nevada continued their month-long dispute over who should be allowed to distribute marijuana and restock pot shops in the Silver State. And this is something we've talked about
extensively
for over a number of shows, that the guys who are making this challenge were not the people who had originally backed the initiative and were going to be part of that, but are people who just decided to take advantage of the way that the initiative was worded, and they are fighting tooth and nail to get that slice that they think
which is
found.
Their right. It was written into the bill, so we have to acknowledge that. But once again, let's just hope that common sense prevails in all this, which is in short supply these days.
We do, but it is interesting to me how sometimes these issues are not about necessarily what you think they are, because to Justice Hardesty, this issue is not about marijuana per se, but his viewpoint is, do we allow an agency to declare an emergency and then justify it later? That looks like, to this record, what's taken place. And that's because without holding a lot of hearings, it was apparent very quickly that this distribution method was not going to be ready in time. And so, in fact, the Department of Taxation did declare this emergency, and the alcohol distributors are saying they really didn't do enough background and do their due diligence to determine that there was in fact going to be an emergency, and that they couldn't have moved quickly enough. And so to the justice, it's a question of yes, can an agency say, oh, there's something wrong going on here, we'll figure it out later?
So he's accusing them of crying wolf? Is that what this is?
I don't think he's accusing them as much as raising the question from the evidence that he has seen so far. So
basically, this continues to drag on indefinitely, and we have no legitimate answers right now.
It's going to continue to drag on. Things don't move quickly up in Carson City, and also in Carson
only when
City,
they want them to, for things like the Raiders.
Yes, and when they want them to. So also in Carson City, we see that the Nevada Attorney General has been asked to rule on the legality of cannabis lounges in the state. And this is an article out of the Nevada Appeal from Jeff Dornan with a date line at the end of September.
Didn't
here.
the Legislative Council Bureau already give their opinion? Does he have the ability to supersede that?
They gave an opinion, but that's that's a bunch of lawyers expressing their opinion on whether a law is valid or not. Generally, you have to get in front of judges to
I thought the LCB was the ones who kind of like determined what was allowed to go into the bills. You know what I mean?
They're kind of like the
overseers.
Write the permissible legal language, but they are not the ultimate legal authority in what's kosher and what's not in the state. And so the Department of Taxation, as a result, has formally asked Attorney General Adam Laxalt for an opinion on whether the law allows marijuana use at special events and in lounges. The request was made in the wake of the Legislative Council's opinion that the voter-approved law allowing recreational marijuana use doesn't specifically prohibit marijuana consumption and possession in places where the public isn't allowed and where entry is restricted to people 21 and over. So I guess there's a little difference here in asking the Attorney General whether these lounges will be legal under the law when the LCB said, well, it's not actually prohibited. So it's more of a case of, is it something?
Is it legal
better to
because
ask
it's
for
not illegal?
Or permission? Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
You see,
exactly.
I don't like the way that's phrased because a lot of, I've seen a lot of proud people fall hard under that assumption. I mean, my boss in 2010 worked under that assumption at the Happiness Consultant. It's not illegal, so it must be legal. And, that didn't end up working out so well.
Not so well.
And also, like, Attorney General Laxalt, I want to say that he's going to be objective, he's going to give a fair opinion, things like that. But he's expressed his, I want to say, concerns numerous times over the marijuana legalization issue. So I'm a little nervous to see what his.
You think he's not a neutral party?
The fact that he didn't come out right away and say, no, I hate the dope and I hate the dopers and I'm going to try to grind you guys down over this, like, that's a good sign. But just knowing where the Nevada Republican Party has been over the past few years, I mean, I'm not holding my breath on it, but I mean, I would love to see an objective, reasonable ruling on this. But, I mean, that's all biased by my standards, of course. So, I got to take that as it comes.
So what else is going on here in town? We were at a meeting a couple of weeks ago and found out that Sanjay Gupta is in town. And I think that a lot of people will credit Sanjay Gupta at CNN with a renaissance in thinking about the legitimacy of medical marijuana. His Weeds special, his first one, really opened a lot of minds, and now they're on to their fourth one already.
No doubt about it, and he's a respected face in that movement, and it's good to have him on board. But long story longer, he is coming to Las Vegas for a free lecture, I suppose he's calling it. It's going to be at, where is this going to be at? The UNLV at the Performing Arts Center box office. We're going to get your tickets, 702-875-2787, and tickets will be available for UNLV faculty, staff, and students beginning at 10 a.m. Wednesday, October the 25th. They will be available to the public at 10 a.m. on Saturday, October 28th. Tickets are only available at the UNLV Performing Arts Center box office. Only 2 tickets per person will be distributed.
And this is going to be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday, so they'll be opening the box office for general tickets 6 hours before.
Yeah, and it's free. It's free. You just have to show up and be first in line. So
and you can only get 2 tickets per person. So if you want to take a group with you to stand online as well.
That's what we had to do for those free Chili Peppers tickets back in 2005 when Oscar put on that free show. But same kind of thing.
I would absolutely think that that Dr. Gupta is well worth spending an hour or two of your time to listen to what he's got to say about this, because people like him who have the public microphone really have a special ability and responsibility to get the truth out there.
Well, and he doesn't come off as this really hyper-partisan character like you see in mainstream media these days. He's not like, a radical leftist or a right-wing extremist. He's not... Like, even Dr. Carson has kind of lost some of that credibility due to his stance in the election. He used to be this very universally respected dude, and now he's kind of this religious right-wing dude as people see him. Yes. And Gupta has been able to kind of walk that line, and it's important to have that neutral opinion out there so people just can kind of hopefully look at it objectively, regardless of the fact that he's on CNN.
Right.
So
well, that's the difference between a journalist and a commentator, and he tries to be more of the former. So anyway, don't miss that because it's going to be well worth your time, and we'll see if we can get in there with our cameras and get a little coverage for you. So also, I saw something towards the end of last month. About another dispensary that had opened, and it wasn't quite a dispensary, and you seem to make the rounds of them. Did you ever get over to Elevate there?
No, actually, no, I did not. But basically, the long and the short of it is that this guy was operating a fake medical dispensary. This is the first case we've heard of this since July, since it became recreationally legal.
And it's a brick and mortar.
The guy's got the guy's got big giant balls to try this for sure. I don't know what the hell he was thinking though. Basically, he just kind of did it old school California style. Just went in, got a lease, just set up shop, no business license, no nothing, and just put up a neon sign and called himself Elevate Dispensary over on Westwood Drive, down that kind of in the dispensary corridor. So I guess he was trying to blend in, I suppose. And
the choice of the name Elevate because of course there is a local magazine
called Elevate within the industry. And the cops, of course, came in, shut him down, and the owner was very confrontational in his approach. He's just like, oh, this doesn't have anything to do with weed. Of course, they recovered 25 pounds of flowers on site and 36 pounds of edibles, 80 grams of THC wax from the store. He is not a citizen of the United States, and he was supposedly trying to start his own country.
Yeah, he says he's not a citizen. He says he's trying to start his own country, which is great.
The tax department received a tip about the unlicensed marijuana store and contacted Clark County officials, who then reached out to Metro, and here we are. This is a good reminder to the community to make sure they're purchasing marijuana from a state licensed store where the products have been produced and tested under tight regulations, Tax Department Director Dion Coteen said.
I just love it. I see this in the RJ or in the Sun, where you have police lieutenants or the director of tax saying, make sure you buy your pot from state legal stores. Only get your pot that we're going to get our cut off of.
It's funny because that's something that I have gotten used to in transition very rapidly, like the medical language, like calling, like how quickly these government officials have turned that page and just said, look, like we're going to enforce the hell out of this. We're going to shut down these competitors, and we're going to protect our tax base is something that I kind of appreciate. There were loud complaints from medical store owners back just less than a year ago about how the Weed Maps company, which is, if you don't know what Weed Maps is, you should. It's like a map application that you can use on your telephone or your computer to determine where the closest dispensaries, doctors are to you, and delivery services. You can browse their menu, their prices, etc. It's a really useful tool. But regardless, they weren't really interested in determining who was legal or not. Like if you paid them,
no, they were just there for the revenue.
Yeah, they don't give a shit.
Their basic listings banners were $2,500 a month, and so
they're making good money for sure.
To get as many buyers as they could.
And the problem is that a lot of the cannabis community for a long time, they are the industry standard, period. And they're the go-to. So when these legitimate businesses were trying to advertise legitimately, and then you had these underground street dealers also advertising, the average consumer doesn't know what's what, and they're just out there to get their medicine. They're looking for the cheapest prices. So they were kind of grinding the county commission down, like, hey, you got to do something about this. You got to put our unlicensed competitors out of business. And they just basically went, what do you want us to do about it?
Yeah.
And then finally, after months and months of arguing and negotiation, or whatever you want to call it, they finally went ahead and told Weed Maps, instructed them to remove the listings, which just that in and of itself put a lot of those guys out of business because all their clients dried up. But I'm happy to see them take a more proactive approach and have not like a public service announcement or anything, but making the public aware. But what I thought was funny is that this guy Bernard was released from jail on $3,000 bail and is scheduled to be back in court December 5th. So even though this guy was caught with 30 pounds of grass, his bail was only $3,000. So that shows you how far the district attorney's office has come in choosing how to prosecute these crimes.
Absolutely, because I know that some of the people who were arrested for running dispensaries in 10 had bails upwards of $100,000 in some cases.
That's unbelievable.
Some of them were awed, but others had very high bails.
I mean, I've brought this up so many times I've almost blew in the face with it, but I'll say it one more time. There was a shop that I used to go to called Sin City Co-op up on Charleston and Cimarron, and the guy who operated the shop, his name was Nate, and he kind of wanted to stand his ground on that. Like, he knew the cops were coming. He let them come in. You know, it was like he wanted to be that face and go to court and like try to fight it and things like that. Well, he ended up committing suicide because they were trying to stick him with a life sentence for distributing marijuana. The federal government was seeking a life sentence, and he decided rather than face the rest of his life in prison that he was going to take his own life.
Well, essentially, that's what they told all of us who were running dispensaries back then was, here, take this plea deal, and with the exception of people who had some guns involved, everybody who initially got these plea deals got probation, and they were saying, take the deal, or we're going to start stacking charges, and we'll bury you under the jail. And so they really didn't give people much of a choice there. So
no doubt, but regardless, like, this is that same district attorney's office that was referred it to the feds for a life sentence, who now just gave this guy a $3,000 bail, and he was out the same day for 30 pounds. That's how far it's come.
Well, that's a positive step.
No doubt.
Another positive step will be to pay the bills. So we'll be right back.
Retrospects is a purveyor, if you will, of historical eyewear. Retrospects is located on the second floor, right across from the Chandelier Bar. So when you look at our store from the outside, it looks like there isn't much going on in here. And then you open the drawers. We actually carry authentic pieces from the late 1890s to the 1990s. We have almost 3,000 pieces in here. It's like a treasure trove reveal. We do have a collection of new glasses that we have reproduced ourselves. It's called the Cuthbert and Chen collection. The safe is our jewel. It's our baby. We love it. It's from 1903. It weighs as much as a car. It's solid steel. We use the safe to hold our most precious pieces, our museum collection, if you will. People come in to find glasses that are not something they're going to find everywhere else. Not something all their friends are wearing, and something that they can tell that story. We sell stories as much as we sell glasses. We have pieces that we can associate with very famous people from history, movies, special events that happened in the past. And some of the favorites are the Ray-Ban shooter that Johnny Depp wore in Fear and Loathing of Las Vegas, the beautiful frame France Parisian plastic aviator worn by Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. Retrospects is not just about glasses. It's about the experience. It's about how these glasses make you feel. We are a full-service optical shop, somewhere where guests can come to get repairs, restoration, can put their prescription in, can get them a quick pair of sunglasses for the pool, and can give them a really great, just fun experience.
And we're back with the Nevada Cannabis News Hour. Tom Angel has been doing absolutely terrific work for the past several years now as a cannabis activist and as one who is getting the news out to people, and he's now a contributor over at Forbes magazine. He's been with Mass Roots and a number of places, and he's really digging up some good hard information on this. And he's got an article on Forbes.com that says Trump administration makes it harder to track marijuana arrests, but I did it anyway. And he says in this article that new FBI data reveals that drug arrests increased in the United States last year, but due to a a change in how annual law enforcement numbers are publicized, it is now harder to determine how many people were busted for marijuana or other drugs specifically. Nonetheless, after a bit of outreach and some number crunching, Tom here was able to determine that marijuana arrests are on the rise in the U.S. even as more states legalize the drug.
I've noticed this. I have a couple of friends who live in I had some hurricane refugees from Katrina who moved here and then moved back to the south eventually. And one of my good buddies lives in Mississippi right now, and I called him. I'm like, hey man, I'm going to come to New Orleans, see ya, like let's hang out. And he's just like, okay, but like I'm on probation. And I'm like, okay, like what'd you do, you get a DUI or something? And he's just like, no, I got caught like having a pipe on me, so they charged me with marijuana possession and paraphernalia, and they gave him like 5 days in jail with a 5-month suspended sentence and a year's probation where he has to take a drug test every 3 months. And he's just like, it was hard for him coming from Nevada and California where like the atmosphere is so lax now, moving back to that area, just kind of keeping that mindset and not realizing that you're still in the Bible Belt down there. You got to watch your shit. And he just wasn't really prepared to go back into that mindset and got himself caught up. And he's like, a couple of his friends are suffering similar things in next door Mobile, Alabama. He's got friends. Like, he lives in Biloxi, and his friends live in Mobile, so they're very close. And they're having similar problems. Possession arrests. People coming through airports from recreational states that are getting popped by dogs. Just
on the receiving end. Wow,
just like strange. Well, they're just low level stuff. You know what I mean? But it's like no one's really smuggling dope, but they hate the dope, they hate the dopers, and they're going to try to grind this down. And I feel like as us activists push hard, they push back harder. Like, think of the Mormons in California for the gay marriage thing. Basically, everyone had thought that the gay marriage thing was won, and California's a super liberal state. They came out, donated all this money, ended up defeating defeating that measure. So, like, just when you think you got it won, you can't take your foot off the gas. Is the moral of the story? Like, you have to push harder, even in a municipality or a jurisdiction that you think might be very friendly to your cause. There are powers that be behind the scenes, under the radar, or maybe up in the forefront that are actively working to subvert our will here. Yes. So we have to be diligent.
Oh, absolutely. And you're talking about the Bible Belt here. We have another story, and we'll get back to this this marijuana arrest story here. But briefly, Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin told a talk radio station this week that he would never allow recreational marijuana to be legalized in his state because he worried about people overdosing on pot. Now, Matt Bevin is a self-described Tea Party governor. He's a proud member of the Tea Party, and that says a lot about him. And he told the WHAS radio personality that he had heard horror stories of marijuana overdoses in Colorado, which first voted to legalize pot in 2012. Jason Riley, a reporter for WDRB, reports that Bevin specifically expressed concern that marijuana baked into edibles, such as brownies and cookies, as a primary means of overdosing. And,
there's a tinge of truth there.
A tinge, and that's how they always do this. You can have too much of something, and technically you have overdosed yourself, but not have medical issues or anything like that. And we've talked on the show before about how people can be careless regarding edibles. And
absolutely, but there are common sense regulations coming down through all of these states that are addressing that with levels that are being more restrictive, packaging, like there are all kinds of indicators that are trying to make people a little bit more cautious with these edibles, because even I smoke grass regularly and I fear the edibles. Like if you take too much, like you are going on that ride.
You're on the ride, and there's nothing that you can do about that. But nonetheless, what happens there is you have that experience of a heavy dose may make you feel like you're nauseous, may make you feel like you want to die, may make you think that you're going to die, but you're not. And so it if nothing else, it's a sobering experience about being careful next time about not eating too damn much edibles.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so what happened here was this reporter Riley notes that the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime said this year it could find no evidence of any deaths that stem directly from consumption of cannabis products. He also noted that the U.S. DEA said there have been no overdose deaths reported from marijuana this year. The United Nations Office on Drug and Crime reported this year that there's right.
Do they have them from other years?
No, because there are none. There are none. But they're saying even brand new, even the DEA is saying that there are no overdose deaths, and so you've got this right-wing Republican governor pledging to keep his state free of grass. In the meantime,
they're all about individual liberty, except when they're not,
but
right?
We're talking about Kentucky, right? This is the state of
McConnell
and Rand Paul, and both of whom are strongly supporting hemp bills to allow their farmers to cultivate hemp all around the state.
And Rand Paul, I guess, is the only real libertarian left in the Senate. Mm-hmm. And, it's like this governor. There are two types of people who govern in this country. There are people who we elect in order to represent the will of the people, and there are people that we elect to give their own opinion on our governance and govern by their morals and their standards. And it's up to the citizens in these individual jurisdictions to decide which kind of representative that they want. It seems like the governor here is taking the latter, and he's not listening to what the people of Kentucky must say, but he thinks that his state shouldn't have medical marijuana or any kind of marijuana in anything. And I hope the people that are voting for him are listening to what he, quote unquote, is saying.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how seriously they take that. And
it's not just Kentucky. As I was researching the show, I saw
it's not just about pot. It's about how he governs as a whole.
Exactly. And the same thing is happening up in Idaho because now Idaho has 3 states on its borders that have legalized pot, and their governor is saying, no, it's never going to happen here. We're not going to allow pot in any way. And in fact, last year he vetoed a CBD bill which would have helped kids who have seizures and various other maladies. And
I don't know. How do you know those little kids with seizures aren't just using the non-psychoactive CBD to get high, Mike?
I can't say. I don't really know that for sure. Not having talked to any of them. So let's get back to this other story about marijuana arrests, because this is kind of important to anybody who's listening to this show, I guess. Marijuana possession busts compromised 37.36% of all reported drug arrests in the United States in 2016. And cannabis sales and manufacturing accounted for another 4.18% of the total. So that in combined, that's over 40% of drug arrests in this country are pot-related arrests. And, added together, that's 41.54% of the 1,572,579 drug busts in the country last year. Over 1.5 million drug busts. This means, based on an extrapolation, that police arrested people for cannabis 653,249 times in the U.S., which is one arrest every 48 seconds.
And that's regardless of the lies that are spread constantly about how, no one gets arrested for marijuana possession anymore, and you're flubbing these numbers and just making us look bad. Well, the stats don't lie.
Nope, and this does show progress, because I do remember NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, having posters that they put out in the 70s and 80s saying that one person was busted for pot every 40 seconds. Well, now in 2016, it's only every 48 seconds. So,
well, gee whiz.
You've got time for an extra toke before they get you. It's a crazy situation. So here we are legalizing in 8 states, and we have medical marijuana in almost 30 states now, and we have marijuana arrests on the rise even as more states legalize it. This makes no sense. This goes against the will of the people and relates directly to what you were just saying about government who decides to govern based on their morals, not based on what the people want, because poll after poll is showing that medical cannabis is hugely popular, 80, 90 plus percent.
Yeah,
absolutely.
even among conservatives.
And even just straight out legalized pot has been showing poll after poll over the last year or so a majority in legalization tenor in that sentiment. So it's unfortunate that these governors and these politicians just insist on not representing the people who voted for them. But
well, speaking of that, here's another story from Washington here about how former Attorney General Eric Holder is slamming slamming Trump's Attorney General
Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions
about his obsession with marijuana. Eric Holder on Tuesday has hit Attorney General Jeff Sessions for the Trump administration's push to crack down on marijuana use, calling it an almost obsession. Holder, who served as the Attorney General during the Obama administration, accused Sessions of putting the Justice Department at odds with the agency's previous decisions on marijuana. This comes from the Washington Examiner. Holder has discussed previous Justice Department guidance that said that the federal government would not enforce laws banning recreational marijuana sales in states where the substance was legalized, as long as violations like underage sales in regards to the Cole memo were not taking place. I think it's a really good policy, Holder said in regards at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, according to the Examiner. The Sessions' almost obsession with marijuana, I think, is the thing that puts the Justice Department in this strange place. I think the was a good one. Let the states experiment with the notion that, again, we have these 8 or 9 federal factors, and if you trigger one of these 8 or 9 factors, the feds are going to come in for you, Holder said. Marijuana advocates feared that Sessions would implement expected recommendations from a task force on violent crime calling for a crackdown on marijuana. However, the task force instead called for a study on revising federal enforcement of the laws on the substance.
So he didn't get what he expected. And I got to say, I was never a real fan of Eric Holder while he was in office. I think that he was not a progressive person on the issue of cannabis. That said, the Cole memo has been used since 2013 as a sort of guideposts for the industry, and it is working very well. So I'm not surprised that you have a former Democratic Attorney General criticizing a current Republican Attorney General, but certainly on this issue, we all know that Jeff Sessions is unhinged, and somebody should slip him an edible or two to maybe mellow him.
Well, there was an advocate who so boldly fired up a joint in his office recently, and
Adam
I don't think they took too kindly to that.
Well, I'll tell you what though, because we took a look at that story again, and he went back to court he walked again. They dropped the charges.
Unreal.
They did not want to prosecute him because they didn't want to be part of that media circus on something so small. But he was making.
So you're saying that they weren't giving him what he wanted in that. Is that what you're saying? Is that the government didn't give Adam what he was looking for, which is that platform?
Exactly. That's why they.
So that's the game.
That was the game.
Okay.
That's just how it goes. I've seen similar things happen in other cases as well. So what else have we got here? The Supreme Court.
Another story from Washington.
Another story from Washington, and we were mentioning during the break how 30 years ago when Justice Ginsburg or Judge Ginsburg was nominated for the Supreme Court, and this is a fellow who was in his late 40s, early 50s, and he had admitted to smoking pot once when he was in college, and that derailed his Supreme Court nomination. He was dead in the water, and that's how it's been for 30-some years. Now we've got the new session that just started here in October in the Supreme Court, and we've got a Supreme Court justice, and in this case it was Elena Kagan, who said that I used to be invited to parties where, I didn't know the host, and I can say that long, long ago, marijuana was maybe present at those parties. Boy, that's about as roundabout a way of getting to that issue.
Yeah, but there are other prolific politicians in our history of recent who have come out and openly said that they smoked. George Bush, has admitted that he smoked. I mean, Obama in his autobiography was like, did a little coke. Yeah. No one gave him shit. No one cared.
Right. And President Clinton famously smoked without inhaling.
Right.
Which I know he missed the whole point of it, and he's a Rhodes Scholar. You're supposed to inhale when you smoke.
Slick Willie, man.
Anyway, this came during an oral argument on Wednesday in a case concerning the propriety of arrests by police in certain instances, and what the police are trying to say in this case is that if they stop a vehicle and they smell marijuana smoke in the vehicle, that they can legitimately fear for their safety and therefore need to frisk everybody in the car and pat them down for weapons or drugs or brownies or something like that.
That's why the NRA didn't back up that Philandro Castile guy.
Yes,
yeah,
because he had pot in his system.
Because he had pot in his system, and I actually have yanked my support for the NRA over that incident. I think it was cowardly, and I think it was a missed opportunity for the NRA to reach out to not only the black community but the marijuana community as a whole and give their support and say, look, we fight for everyone's rights, not just our core.
Yeah.
And they did a good job of fucking that up.
Yes, and the Philandro Castile case, for those of you who may not recall, was the case of an African-American male who was pulled over in a traffic stop, and his girlfriend started recording on her phone, and started recording just after the police officer shot this man, Philandro Castile, fatally, and the Philandro Castile told the officer that he had a legally registered firearm in his possession. He was allowed to have one, and the police officer apparently panicked or reacted badly and wound up shooting Castile as he was reaching for his identification.
That's what happens when you have more training for a barber than a police officer.
Indeed, and the way that the local police department justified the shooting was that they said that Philandro Castile had cannabis metabolites in his system and had smoked sometime shortly before it was before this police encounter happened, and so from their telling of it, then consumption of cannabis, while not always prosecutable, is a justifiable death sentence by police.
I was just going to say
in
that.
America.
Yep, it's a death sentence.
It's crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. So anyway, we're going to take another break. We'll be right back.
Put her hand in mine and said she loved me so very long ago.
Hey, how's it going? You can just throw your name up on the list and we'll get right to you. Yeah, thanks, dude. Thanks for coming in. Let me just clean this spot up and then we'll get right to you. You can hop on up if you're ready. Welcome to the shop. You need a shave too, though, right?
I don't know if I would accept a shave from somebody who's unshaven.
I look like a child when I have a clean-shaven face.
No, I wouldn't want a child cutting my hair. And I'd also need to know that the blades have been sanitized thoroughly.
I can guarantee you that the barbicide is 100% authentic, and these are sanitized tools I'm using.
Well, what is the...
Have you ever gotten a straight razor shave?
Is there any other kind? This stuff smells like Irish Spring.
Brings me back to childhood.
Did you grow up in a chemical plant? Hurry up.
Yeah, well, you know. Now you look like $1 million.
Well, that's your job. I'll be sure and mention your facility during my show tonight.
And welcome back to the News Hour. In studying materials for this show and trying to find things relevant, I come across a ton of medical studies, and most of them get way too complex to go into in a casual show like this. But I do like to come up with little things that I find occasionally. And here we have a site called medicalexpress.com, and their study finds up to 1/4 of cancer patients use marijuana. And it says that
No way.
a new study conducted in a cancer center in a state with legalized medicinal and recreational marijuana found that approximately 1/4 of surveyed patients used marijuana in the past year, mostly for physical and psychological symptoms. Published in the early online in Cancer, a peer-reviewed journal of the American Cancer Society, the study also revealed that legalization increased the likelihood of use among patients. And if this was peer-reviewed through the American Cancer Society, I'm willing to give it some credibility here. And so it says in the article that marijuana is purported to alleviate symptoms related to cancer treatment, but patterns of use among cancer patients are not well known. And to investigate, the doctors surveyed 926 patients at the Seattle Cancer Center. So it's in Seattle, Washington, and they're saying roughly a quarter of their cancer patients actually use pot in some degree. And this ties in with another story I saw several weeks ago that says, as compared to most other medications, something on the order of 90% of medical cannabis treatments continue on their medication. They don't have any problem with their medical cannabis.
So what you're but hold on. So what you're saying is that
a lot of people don't finish their medications. Whether
sure, I have old antibiotics in my
right, all sorts of stuff. And what the study was saying was that when you have people using cannabis as their medicine, people are much more likely to stay on that course
because
of
they
treatment.
enjoy it. Yeah, I imagine that.
You know. It was Mary Poppins who said a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, and a spoonful of cannabinoids, I guess, do just as well.
Fair enough.
All right, what else we got here?
Oh boy. Well, kind of a silly story out of Stanford, North Carolina, and this is just like a word to the wise. Like, if you're like my buddy in Mississippi and you have weed charges and you got pulled over for some stupid shit, and don't bring your weed to court.
Don't compound it by being more stupid.
Just don't do it. A North Carolina man has been arrested and charged with trying to hide marijuana in the bushes at a courthouse before a hearing on a possible probation violation. If you went to middle school in any urban environment, they got metal detectors, you got to stash your knives outside. Like, you should know, school has trained you for this. Local media outlets report that Lee County Sheriff Tracy Carter said 21-year-old Tian Shamal Lashane Douglas of Sanford was arrested Monday after deputies saw him putting pot and a cell phone and some other items in the bushes at the courthouse. The narcotics officer saw him put 15 grams of marijuana in the bushes before entering to serve his probation. Carter said Douglas was arrested after the probation hearing and charged with felony possession with intent to sell and deliver marijuana and misdemeanor possession of drug paraphernalia. It is not known if he had an attorney on the latest charges. Now that really sucks. Felony possession with intent to sell for 15 grams of cannabis.
That's what I was wondering when you read that out. Where are they getting intent to sell unless it is a
15 individual baggies?
Well, okay.
I mean, but they didn't mention that. They just said it was a bag of 15 grams of pot.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing that in there.
Yeah, it's possible it could have been broken down.
They didn't say they had a scale or anything like that, so it's just like, I don't understand.
Well, some jurisdictions will define possession with intent based on a quantity.
On the weight, yeah. But half an ounce? I mean, you know what I say when I get down to a quarter ounce? I'm out of weed.
When I moved to Nevada in 1998, 2 seeds was a felony. So
I remember, the don't gamble with marijuana signs and stuff like that. 20 to life for a seed. I was on the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I think there was a clip of that when they're driving into town. They drive by that sign.
Yeah. So we've been covering this story about CBDs and sports for a while here. And
yeah.
We've got Nick Diaz, who I don't really know.
Nick and Nate Diaz are prolific, very famous, like 155-pound mixed martial arts fighters in the UFC, which is like the dominant organization in that arena, and they are not notoriously friendly, but they are very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, they don't care what people think about what they do. They're going to do whatever they want, and to hell with what your opinion is. And the Diaz brothers have been very vocal advocates of marijuana use. They're from California. You know, Nick Diaz, or I think, was it Nick or Nate? I think it was Nate, was so bold as to go on television at the post-fight press conference after one of his very high-profile fights, and was smoking a CBD vaporizer pen right in front of the press. And they were questioning, hey, what are you doing? What are you smoking? Because he had been suspended for having THC in his system by the USADA.
He could have said, I'm just having an e-cig. But
yeah, but he was just like, look, I'm smoking CBD. It helps me with the swelling and this and that. And that really kind of jump-started this conversation about should CBD be lopped in with THC as a prohibited substance with these organizations that determine whether you're allowed to fight or not.
And the DEA is saying yes. They're saying, it's
the
always
DEA
been
says
prohibited.
yes, but the United States Anti-Doping Association has now said no. They have recently removed CBD from their list of banned substances, which round of applause for sure. Where this goes on a greater level, like, is this going to apply for Olympic athletes, or like how far will this go is yet to be seen. But it definitely opens the door to have more negotiation on this issue, because I remember I think it was Julio Cesar Chavez is what the one that I use so often. He had a boxing fight, showed up positive for THC, and got fined $900,000. Wow. It was $1 million joint is what the story was titled. And it's just...
That must have been some good shit.
Yeah. I've had expensive joints myself, but never on that scale.
That's kind of like Bill Maher category joints.
Yeah. But it's just like, the more we can get these agencies to show some flex, it's just chipping away that tree.
Well, I think if we were talking about the U.S. Foosball Association or the U.S. Frisbee Association, it wouldn't have a lot of weight. But the fact that you're talking about an organization in the UFC that is so of the cloth of middle America and flyover country and rural whatever.
I was just going to say inherently violent, but sure.
Yeah, and so because it is so integral to that part of the country, I think that this is an opportunity to open their eyes about the usefulness of CBD, and once again opening their eyes to the lies of prohibition that have been going on for
absolutely
years.
The most dangerous part of cannabis is the lies that are told about it. Well, unfortunately, I think we're just about out of time for today, and thank you so much for joining us on WWDBTV.com this afternoon, and we're so grateful to have you guys as our partners. And there's only one event that we have to tell about right now. It's our annual, I think it's our 5th annual Halloween party. It'll be on, what is it, Saturday the 28th of October, coming up in just a couple weeks here, and it'll be at our mansion that is so generously donated to us by the Jameson family up in Boulder City. And it is just drop dead beautiful property. We'll have vendors, music, etc. If you've been to any of our Halloween parties before, it's more of the same. Come, bring your friends, bring your family. It's recreational now, so we don't have to. You don't have to be a patient to attend. Please come one, come all. Show your support, and just thank you again for everything, for showing your continuing support.
Indeed, and we always run out of time before we run out of news, and so check the links that are associated with this video, and you'll find a bunch of stories that we've talked about, and a whole bunch more that we didn't have time for. But there's some really interesting stuff in there. So keep informed, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.